Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode here, Brian with Briggs Motorsports. Diving right into today's content, we're going to continue with the Project RX-7. But with today's video, we're actually going to switch it up a bit. And actually what I mean by switching it up is we're actually not going to do anything mechanical to the car today. In fact, we're going to take a look at the interior. And for those of you who are FD owners, I know you guys feel my pain. With this particular car, the interior starts to become old. It starts to become brittle. Things break. So today's content is actually going to be the removal and the teardown of the interior on my FD RX-7. So for all my car enthusiasts out there, we all know that in the 90s, cars were made of nothing but pure plastic on the inside. And with this almost being in the year 2020, we also know that this plastic just simply won't hold up anymore. So we start looking for substitutes, or particularly in a race car like this, we look to gut out the car. Now, as awesome as that would be, that's simply not my goal with this car. Now, I'd like to keep the feel of the interior as original as possible, while also making some minor adjustments and some modern touches to it as well. But first, we're going to need to disassemble the interior, taking any inventory of what may be damaged from the previous owner, using that as a building block to build the interior that we want. So, let's get started. Now, before I touch anything, I'm actually going to give you guys a walkthrough of the car. So with the engine bay, as I said before in the last video, the last owner, I believe, did leave the car with the hood off. I mean, there's just way too many leaves, debris, dirt, that sort of thing. So here in the next couple weeks, what we're going to be looking to do is we're going to just power wash this whole thing, clean it out, degrease it down, so that way we have a clean platform with the engine bay going forward. And also with the exterior, for those of you who don't know, these door handles happen to just be a pain. And they also happen to just break over time. They're brittle, just like the interior. So we're going to be looking to replace that door handle as well with some aluminum ones for the driver's side as well as the passenger side. So the first thing you guys are going to notice once the door is popped is the seat. The seat definitely needs to either be reupholstered or replaced. However, I do like the look of the original seats, so we're actually going to look into reupholstering them, getting some new skins, some new leather skins, or we're going to look at upgrading the skins maybe to a different design or different material. And actually looking at the door panels, they don't look too bad. Actually, they don't look bad at all. So I will be looking to reuse these. Just a little TLC, maybe use some panel cleaner or some interior trim cleaner, something along those lines. The thing that is faulty when it comes to the driver's side door panel, especially with the early model FDs, is the map lid. So I don't know if you guys can see that, but just that corner there is completely shot. So I did buy a replacement already for this. It wasn't extremely expensive, and there's not a lot of companies who actually make this. I will disclose that later on when we do the assembly of the interior. And with the 93 models, they did use more of a smooth finish. I don't know if you guys are able to see that, but they did use more of a smooth finish with the trim. And with that, as you guys can see, it's also easily scratched. It's easily damaged. So we're actually going to be looking at replacing most of this trim here. And we might actually use the 94 and up textured finish with this just to make sure that our interior does not look like this again. Now, surprising, besides the seat and the minor defects with the door panel, the carpets on the car actually look phenomenal. I was actually shocked by that when I did purchase the car. As you know, most 90s carpets happen to be ribbed, torn. There's just all kind of stains, and they end up having to be replaced. So with this, we're definitely going to be reusing this carpet, and in fact, we're probably not even going to be removing it. And now that we're in the cockpit of the car, it is pretty dusty in here. I do have the windows down with the motor pulled out and the battery pulled out. I have no control over that. But as you guys can see, I do have the glove box ripped out. The reason being is because when we had to take the wiring harness out, the glove box is just simply in the way. So I figured with the interior being the way it is, we're just going to keep that removed. The glove box is actually in excellent condition, so we won't be replacing that, but it will just be out of the way going forward when we are removing the rest of the stuff here. So starting with the steering wheel here, I'm not completely sold on this steering wheel. To me, it just looks really outdated. And with the more modern steering wheels and with the variety of steering wheels that there are out there, we're definitely going to be replacing this, giving it maybe a smaller feel, making it more comfortable with the smaller cockpit. Now, looking beyond the steering wheel, one of the things that I absolutely love about this car is how everything is geared towards the driver. I mean, even the gauge cluster just looks out over that steering wheel. It's giving you every reading to the car, whether it's fuel, whether it's oil pressure, the temperature of the car. I love how the RPM gauge is sitting right there in the middle, and you also have the speedometer over off to the right. Kind of gives you just that ultimate cockpit feel, almost like the Supra. Not as much, but the RX-7 is definitely up there. So with that being said, the gauge cluster is almost perfect, and I mean almost perfect, to the point to where you guys are probably gonna say I'm so nitpicky for this and I'm gonna be wasting my money. However, it's my car. I want to go with the fresh start. As I was mentioning earlier, with this smooth textured finish, things get scratched up so easy. It's almost crazy how you can just pretty much almost take your fingernail and just pick at this interior all day. So around the cigarette lighter here, we do have a couple scratches, and we do have a couple scratches around the knobs on the radio bezel as well. So I'll actually be replacing pretty much all of this. The thing with the instrument cluster as well is I haven't showed you guys yet, but there is a crack on the actual instrument cluster hood itself. So just these two pieces alone is a pretty penny, but it's going to be worth it when I do have that new interior look and that interior feel. Now moving on to the shifter and the center console here. This center console, there's no tabs broken or anything on it. It just comes up. I mean, it's just loose. I mean, I can just simply take a couple fingers and pry this thing up, which is not what I want with my interior. Also, you can see that the shifter boot is ripped, and you can see that the shifter knob is just, I mean, it's just messed up. I mean, we're definitely replacing those, hands down. Now, looking across the way, and every FD owner, I would say, has this issue, or has had this issue, or definitely will have this issue. There's no handle. So I went ahead and I actually purchased a handle. These things are hard to come by if you're looking for an original one out of another RX-7. Simply put, you're just gonna have to either find one on an online store, on an online RX-7 store, and it's gonna be an OEM part, and it's gonna be super expensive. There are some guys that make an aftermarket part. I actually went with the aftermarket just for the simple fact that the leather and the finish is absolutely perfect. So when we are assembling that, I will be revealing that. I will also be dropping the name of that company who makes that as well. So moving on with the rest of the passenger side here, this seat, it does not seem to have any rips or tears as the driver's side did. So whatever finish I decide to go with on the driver's side, whether I decide to either go with the leather look again, or I decide to get a more modern texture, whether it be cloth or something of that nature, the driver's side will definitely determine what the passenger side will look like. I'm not going to have two different sets of finishes, or I'm not going to have a racing seat and just an original seat. I want everything matching in this car. So I know I don't have a bunch of light shining in, but I can just tell you guys right now, the headliner, the A pillars, the B pillars are just simply in immaculate condition. I mean, there's no rips, no tears, no nothing. The leather looks like it's, I mean, factory finish. It looks like how it did on day one. So none of that is absolutely going to be removed. We're going to be reusing that. Even the sun visors seem to be in the most excellent condition. I mean, I was simply amazed when I just looked up, saw the headliner, and it definitely was one of the things that sold me on this particular FD. And moving on to the rear of the car, the trunk is probably the thing I feel needs the most work. You do have a couple of the trim pieces that have over time just been cracked, they're worn, they're discolored, which I hate the most is when you get a pretty much solid black interior and things are just weathered over time. I mean, things are just, they get discolored. I hate when things get discolored, because when you're trying to look for these specific parts, they will be hard to find. So you're almost left with a couple solutions. Either wait, play the waiting game, hope that you can come up on a couple pieces from another RX-7. Hopefully another guy out there is parting out his car. Or you could take up the option, there is interior trim paint, which you can purchase at your local paint store. I believe you could purchase them at your local AutoZone or O'Reilly's as well. But that's not what we're looking to do. So looking at the back of this car right now, I can already tell you this is not the original carpet. I mean, this is just not. So we're definitely taking that out. I mean, we're not going to be keeping that. So the last owner did mention to me that he does like a sound system in his car. I particularly do not. I will be keeping head unit or stereo in the car. However, I'm not looking for anything extra. I'm not trying to put big speakers in this car. I'm not trying to keep this amplifier. So this amplifier, as well as the wiring in the car, will be coming out. Now, looking around, I do see that he did keep the spare, which I actually think it's pretty cool. You don't see a lot of 90s cars with the spare, and this one may not even hold air, but just the fact that this is in the car, the nostalgia of having this in the car is just simply amazing. So we will be keeping that going forward. So now, guys, what we're going to be doing is we're going to start by disassembling the seats first, and we're going to just pretty much work our way back. And I'm actually going to be doing a time-lapse video. I'm not going to be giving you guys a step-by-step or tutorial on how to do so, because it's fairly simple. If you just have the simple know-how or the simple tools of how to take apart the interior, it's not that hard. I mean, it's simply a couple nuts and bolts and some trim, some tabs on the trim, and you're just pulling those back and pulling that apart. So let's get started. I'm ready to go. So as you guys can see, I mean, now that we have the seat out, now that we have the rear cover back here off, you can see that this the last owner did leave the car out where debris was able to get into the car. So what we're going to do is we're just going to vacuum this up, clean this up. That way we have a cleaner slate to work with, and I'm actually able to see what I'm pulling. I mean, because there's just so many leaves and debris. But it's always good when you find money and change in there. And there's also some under the carpet, which I'm going to grab. This little slit right here. I don't know why that was the money grabber, but hey, might buy me a slushie or something. Who knows? So, gonna clean this up. So now that we've gotten it at least a little cleaner than what we had it before, got all the leaves up. Gonna continue with the rear bins, getting that out of here. Then probably move on to the center console, getting that stripped, the other seat. And then possibly moving on to the back. Just taking inventory of the back just to see what maybe we have to go ahead and buy new and what we can salvage. But overall, the job's not hard. It's not looking too bad right now. I don't see anything alarming. So as I mentioned, some things are discolored. So I will be looking to replace those pieces if I can get my hands on them. If not, hang on to them at least until we can get some new pieces. Possibly spray those down maybe with some trim paint or something like that, just to kind of get it to color match. But yeah, let's keep moving.
CJ on the
And that amp is finally out of there. It was a pain. I mean, all this wiring here, all that wiring there, and then how they jimmy rigged it with the pieces that they use. I mean, this is what they were using to hold it down. I mean, that's ridiculous. But I'm glad we got it out of there. Now we can move on to the rear bins. Just get those 3 nuts there. Move on to the other side and get the 10 mil that's at the bottom that holds these in, and then it should come out. So we're gonna move on to that, and then like I said, we're gonna get to the center console, we're gonna get to the seat, and I also want to pull these door cards off today just to really see what we're working with, make sure there's no broken tabs, make sure there's nothing else that's going on with this car. As far as the interior, everything else is coming along great. I mean, I don't see any issues. Just certain things that are weathered that need to be replaced, as we already mentioned prior to us starting the teardown of the interior. So we're gonna move on to that, and that's about it for the rear. So my battery on the M50 completely died. So I had to switch to the GoPro here for a second. As you guys can see, just a little bit of work off camera. I did take the other back panel out. We also loosened out the bolt for the buckets or the bins, and also pre-loosened the bolts for the seat as well. So everything's coming along nice. Like I said, there's no issues. That rear trim back there for the trunk is not as bad as I thought it was going to be. It's actually well put together. I do have a few cracks, but nothing that can't be either plastic welded or glued from the other side to give it the appearance that there's nothing wrong. So I will be keeping that trim. Just needs a little cleanup. I'm also going to be looking to possibly roll cage this. Just taking a look at how much space is in here. I'd actually like to get maybe a half cage in here, get some harnesses in here, keep the stock seats. That's probably what's going to happen going forward, as I can see how everything's coming along inside. Just got to get the door panels off, see what's going on with that, and then we'll go ahead and get the rest of this all out of here and call it a night.
Retro. Retro.
So guys, we were able to get the bins out, also get the center console out, as well as the shifter bezel here. Something cool we found. Found the handle here under the seat. So I just got to get this area cleaned up. That handle is definitely not going back on. So now we're gonna pull the radio bezel here. I don't know if I'm going to pull the gauge bezel or gauge cluster bezel tonight. Might leave that in there, but we will be definitely getting, like I said, to these wires. This is just a mess. I want this out of here, as well as that power cable to the amp. But other than that, a lot of the trim will be staying put. I mean, even at the rear, it's not that bad. Just needs a little cleanup. So, moving on to the bins. The bins here, I mean, it's a 93. So, I mean, gonna have some minor scratches on it. But overall, I'm actually happy with it. We will be keeping it when we reinstall. Just gonna give it, some TLC, give it some love here, and kind of restore that there. With these seats, I'm looking at the seats now. I'm actually gonna be going back with the leather skins, and now that I'm thinking of doing the roll cage, we're actually gonna use a harness. So, yeah, so that's the plans with the interior so far. So let's continue getting the rest of this ripped out, get the other side cleaned up. And we'll be done for the night. So as you guys can see, I actually ended up having to take out the gauge cluster bezel, as well as the radio bezel. The radio bezel was already coming out. I did detach it from a bolt here, but you have to semi take out the gauge cluster, at least to give you enough room to get the bolt here and here that are actually mounting on the gauge cluster, or else you're going to rip the tabs. I mean, even though I was replacing this anyway, I still didn't want to do too much damage to it, just in case I do end up having to reuse it. So I'm glad I was able to salvage that part, but we were not able to salvage the gauge cluster. It was already cracking. I mean, it just took a complete dive on me. So I will be removing the gauges themselves from this housing, but we will be definitely be replacing that housing there. That's not reusable. It's an expensive part, but it's a part that I'm willing to change out to give it a fresher look for the dash. But that pretty much wraps it up. We got the door panels off. Those weren't too hard. The door panels will be reused. A couple pieces from the door panels that will be getting replaced. We already talked about that. Now it's just time to get these wires out of here. They're all attached to the stereo, so I may have to pull out the stereo. Hopefully I don't. Hopefully I can just reach behind there. But other than that, I mean, this carpet especially, was in great condition. Nothing wrong with the carpet. No tears, no rips. Everything's in place. I will be shampooing and vacuuming the carpet before I do reinstall the interior. And yeah, I mean, everything looks good. Everything looks good. So we're gonna call this a night.
And guys, we're back. So where we left off last night was we had the remaining wiring from the sound system that the last owner had installed. As you guys know, I'm not a fan of having a complete sound system hooked up to a race car. So today we're gonna be actually tearing that out, and that's gonna complete our teardown for this Project RX-7 that we have here. So let's get started.
So, as you guys can see, we got it out. The wiring harness is here. Or not the wiring harness, but the wiring for the stereo system. It was held on by a couple zip ties underneath, which we cut those off, reached back behind the radio or the stereo system there, and just pull the wires out. I mean, it was simple. And then we're going to move on to the red power cable that sits on the other side there, get that pulled out, and then we'll have the wiring for the sound system completely pulled out there. And I will be looking to install a completely different stereo system. It just won't be complete with the amp and the speakers and all that. So that's about it. So let's get started on that power cable. So as you guys can see, we got the cables out from the stereo system. Carpet's looking really good. I gave it one last vacuum before we decided to order the rest of the trim for the interior. And there are the cables.
So guys, that does conclude our video on the teardown of the interior on the FD here. As I mentioned before, I will be ordering some of the trim that was not salvageable. Luckily for me, most of it was. So I will be cleaning up those parts and getting them prepped and ready for the next install. And just a quick update on the 13B. I still have it torn down, but I will be reaching out to a few companies this week to see if we can find some suitable ones for our rebuild. So stay tuned, as we will be having more content here on our Project RX-7. So give us a big thumbs up, subscribe to our content below. Brian with Briggs Motorsports. As always, I'll see you guys next week.